there's two certain things in life, and that's death and that's taxes.
It sure
right?
is.
We got to show up for both.
Yeah, you sure do. And sometimes people, I think, get a property maybe they didn't really want, or sometimes they, when they're doing the 1031 exchange, they feel like, oh, I don't want to pay those taxes. And it's not that you don't have to pay the taxes. You said it earlier. You're just deferring those taxes later on.
Yes.
Yeah, because it still has to be paid, and somebody's going to have to pay that. Even if your kids inherit it, they're going to have to pay the tax on that one day. All right, welcome back. I'm Jason.
And I'm Colter. Glad to be here.
And this is the Massive and Passive Income Show. So we're going to talk about something that is boring at concept, but exciting when implemented. Right?
And understood, right? And that's the complex part, is we're talking about taxes.
Taxes,
right?
Man.
Oh, man. You just, what is the scripture? Like, put a mote in your eye kind of thing? Like
Something in your eye? I don't remember. Widow's mite or something in there.
Yeah, well, apparently we shouldn't quote very much scripture on this show.
That's right. No, but taxes is, it's one of those necessary things. It has to happen. And don't become part of tax evasion. We call it tax preparation. So there are so many things written out there for business owners, entrepreneurs, real estate investors. Ranching and farming and real estate are pretty much the only business you can have where you can declare a loss every year without the IRS calling them saying, hey, any other business you have to declare, you can only have a loss 3 out of 5 or 2 out of 5, right? You have to make a profit 3 out of 5 years. 3 years out of 5 years, you have to make a profit. Otherwise, they're like, okay, guys, you need to shut this down or do something different. But in real estate or farming and ranching, you can claim 0 negative till the cows come home.
Till the cows come home. Well, and some of those factors that weigh in on being able to declare a loss is you have the non-cash expenses that can show up because of the asset types that we purchased.
Yeah.
So in real estate, you're buying assets, you're cash flowing assets, and then you have these non-cash expenses like depreciation that come in that says this asset, even though you paid $1 million for it, over 27 and a half years or 39 years, depending on if it's residential versus commercial property, you can amortize that value over those periods of time.
So you take the land value out, right?
Take the land value out, and then the improved value you take, and you're able to count that against your taxable incomes.
Perfect.
And so we'll talk about a couple of different things. I think we should talk short-term capital gains or short-term operating incomes, long-term capital gains, and then deferred tax strategies.
Love it.
So what in your mind would be a short-term tax that would show up for you?
Like a fix and flip. Be short-term, less than 90 days. Well, try to be less than 90 days. Sometimes it'll be in 6 months. But yes, shorter than 90 days. And you make a profit, and you have to declare that.
You do, and I like to refer to it as like an inventory. So if I'm doing a fix and flip, my inventory is that house. So I've taken it, and in its raw form, I'm taking the house that needs repairs, I'm improving it, and then I'm flipping it, or I'm turning it back to the next customer as quickly as I possibly can.
So it's kind of like a product.
It's kind of like a product.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of like me, if I have a manufactured product, I take some raw materials, I turn it into a widget, and I sell that. That's considered an operating income. It's similar in real estate as you have a short-term capital gain.
Yeah.
Is that you're buying your product, you're improving it, you're selling it to the end consumer, and now you have your short-term capital gain as referred to real estate. And that's any window that is 365 days and less. So less than 1 year holding period from closing to sell date, you would be considered in that short-term capital gain aspect. So long-term capital gains is anything longer than a year.
365 days and up.
Yep. So anything exceeding that 365, now you're in that long-term capital gains category, and you get to be taxed at the long-term capital gains rates.
And long-term capital gains would be even your personal home, especially if you lived in it longer than a year, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So long-term capital gains, you hold it for longer than a year, you get to go on a tiered scale of your capital gains rates based on your tax bracket, and we can post that in the show notes as to what those tax brackets are. It's more complex than what we need to dive into, but there's some good references on the IRS websites or other websites that are helpful. But then, so looking at that, you're able to work your capital gain down by holding on to that for a year. So if you rent it out or you do a lease option, you're able to defer those taxes as well as take a reduced rate by holding on to property.
Yeah.
Then, what are some of the deferred tax strategies that you've seen or have used, Jason?
Man, deferred tax strategies. I mean, we try to defer everything we possibly can. Expenses is deferred, right? Interest is deferred. Mm-hmm. What else are you thinking?
So I'm thinking specifically in like 1031 exchanges.
Oh, 1031, sorry. And we even talked about it before the show. Yeah, so 1031 exchanges. So that's an interesting strategy. And here's the thing that's funny. I remember taking a class on 1031 exchanges. He said, some people go crazy. They're gonna make $100,000 on a home that they're gonna sell, and they don't want to pay that extra 10 or 15% in capital gains on top of their other tax. So they go through all this crazy stuff trying to find a 1031 exchange and roll it over stuff to pay it. And the guy's like, a lot of times just take the hit of the 10 or 15% extra, because you're gonna make $100,000. Like, I mean, I understand we don't want to pay as minimal taxes as possible, but I think sometimes we get so wrapped up into, I don't want to pay these taxes, that you go through all this process and end up exchanging that property into another property, and it's a property you may not even wanted in the first place, but you didn't have to pay that extra 10 or 15% in capital gains. And so be careful with that. Don't get tied up into the, oh man, I don't want to pay any more tax than I need to. Taxes is a necessary thing. Now, we want to minimize as much as possible, but sometimes, if you get this property and you want to sell it, and you want to take that money and buy another property, if that's your strategy, that might be good. But if you want to sell it and take some of the cash and you're like, man, I don't want to pay all that money in taxes, maybe I want a different something else I can put my money into, then it may be good, it may be bad. You just kind of have to work that out. But 1031 exchange is where you sell the property and then you have, is it 90 days?
You have 90 days, you have to find a like property. You have to, there's a whole bunch of rules. You can identify 3, but you can only close on 1. And so
you have to have an administrator that can handle 1031 exchange, because you have to have a third party to come in and validate everything. And so
that's where you really have to think about the complexity of the deal that you're doing. If you're making $100,000 and it's taking you 90 days, then do you really have to defer that tax? Or do you just take it and say, hey, you know what, in 90 days I was able to do this. Let me go and do that every single quarter for the next year.
Yeah.
And now you've been able to, instead of having to defer that taxes or that batch of taxes down the road, pay the tax. And you're not paying the tax as of the day of close, you're paying it as of next year. So take your $100,000, go and invest it wisely, make sure that you can get it back out. But if you are spending, you're spending an extra 10 to 15% on your taxes, sometimes the cash just feels so much better just going into your bank account, because now you can turn it over and go into the next property and not make a hasty decision on the next property just because you gotta deploy it back into something else. And you pay potentially an extra 10 to 15% for the entire next property by doing it in such a hasty manner. So it really has to be weighed in the balances as to when and how. Yeah. And there's 2 certain things in life, and that's death and that's taxes.
It sure
right?
is.
We got to show up for both.
Yeah, you sure do. And sometimes people, I think, get a property maybe they didn't really want, or sometimes they when they're doing the 1031 exchange, they feel like, I don't want to pay those taxes. And it's not that you don't have to pay the taxes. You said it earlier, you're just deferring those taxes later on.
Yes.
Yeah, because it still has to be paid, and somebody's going to have to pay that. Even if your kids inherit it, they're going to have to pay the tax on that one day.
And this is what I don't love about deferred taxes, is that, if I look at the trends and all of the factors that come into tax planning, is I know what is for certain this year. But if I know anything about the government or appreciation or inflation or these factors that weigh in on the cost of money, is that in 5 to 10 years, I don't necessarily expect that my tax rates are going to go down. If anything, I expect it to go up.
Yeah.
Right? If I expect my incomes to grow It means that my goodness, that's a mouthful. I'm sick of saying taxes. I'm sick of taxes, Jason.
You're an accountant.
I'm an accountant.
You can't be.
No. I am not a tax accountant.
That's true. That's true.
Right? I took a few courses and I understood enough to be like, hey, that's for somebody else.
That's for somebody smart. Not that you're not smart. That's not what I said either.
Thanks, Jason. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'll be finding a new host to host with me next time.
That's not what I meant.
Jason's finding the smart one.
in taxes. Smart in taxes. There you go. Because it's a different breed, people that are in taxes and love that stuff. Mark Kohler's one of them.
Really
and he'll admit it. He'll admit it.
And that's where, I recommend you hire the right tax professionals to make sure you're doing it right for you.
Yeah.
If you're talking short-term, long-term capital gains, or if you're talking about deferred tax strategies, 1031 exchanges being one of those options, there are so many factors in there that you have to comply with. And I have hired a half dozen CPAs at different times for different strategies, for valuations, for tax approaches here, for cryptocurrency expertise, real estate expertise. And although I have gone and been educated in accounting and finances and have gotten degrees and gotten certifications, at the end of the day, there are people far more qualified than I am
because they do it every day.
They do it every day. And so because they do it every day, and that's what they're focused on, not me acquiring assets and cash flowing assets and creating businesses and building businesses, that is my forte.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to focus on. And other professionals are going to complement me being able to do a good job at what I'm really good at.
Definitely.
And so we're going to talk about these strategies. Now you have to go and hire the right people to make sure that you implement them correctly. But if you don't know anything about them, you do not know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And you cannot implement what you don't know. And so we just want you to start with educated questions.
Concept.
And have the concept and be able to run with it and say, hey, you know what? I want to do this. I've heard about 1031 exchanges. Does it apply to me? And
Is it something I want to do?
Yeah, but don't do it on $10,000.
Yeah.
Don't do it on $50,000, in my
seriously.
opinion. But now if you start to get into that $100,000 range, and that's your strategy to flip and roll into the next property, the next, and you have properties that you feel like you can roll those into and do it wisely, heck yeah, jump into it, go after it.
I have a friend who, he's a farmer, been a farmer for years, and he sold off a piece of property. And this commercial company came in and bought this big chunk of land, like 45 acres. And there was another chunk of land that he's wanted for years. The guy would never sell. He would never sell it. And plus he wanted way too much money. But he's like, I'm a farmer. My son's going to farm. This farm is going to be around here for the next 100 years. So I want to keep this money because he had it all paid off. And so he sold that property, rolled that, and went to the guy. He already had the piece of property he's been trying to buy and said, look, this is your one shot. Like, I got an X amount of dollars. I'm going to give you a really fair, more than fair price for your property. This is your shot. Otherwise, I'm going to go take this money. I'm going to buy another piece of land, but I want yours. And the guy said yes. So that made sense. He sold this piece of property, went on the other side of his farm, bought another big chunk of property, and he sold this for so much because it was considered commercial. He was able to buy, that was 40 acres. He bought 60 acres and was able to secure it without any tax, without any money, without anything extra. He was able to secure that other land. So it worked out perfect for him.
Well, and good for him because now that he has that 60 acres, and if the son is taking over, there's estate planning and, being able to gift certain things to your kids, what instead of it going into probate, being able to be an inheritance. And there's a whole different tax episode, one that we probably won't dive into, but there's so much to it.
So much to it. And you can even buy something that's more or less. Like say you sell this property for $1 million, you found a property for $500,000, you got a whole bunch of cash you want to move over, you could pay the capital gains on the portion of what didn't purchase that property too. So that could be a strategy also.
Yeah.
You could just, okay, so I'm going to move 500 grand over, but I'm still going to make another 500 grand. So you pay capital gains on 500, take the other 500 and defer it. So that's possible too. And sometimes that is advantageous for somebody in estate planning to look forward to the future. That may work out perfect for somebody.
Yeah. Well, very good. There's so many things, and thanks, Jason, for diving into those. I think there's some great examples, farmer being one of them, and creating a strategy that allows for him to plan for decades ahead. Just look for those tools, those resources. Reach out to us. Let's talk more about strategies that can help you build wealth. and implement, buy real estate, buy assets, and improve your lifestyle, whatever it is you're looking for.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, Jason.